AudiobookHubs that provoke. This book is trying to air some of my views, perhaps uncommon and controversial, about a few issues that we constantly grapple with. All my observations may not be fully and unquestionably right, nor will they be a farce, and completely devoid of merit. Written by Roy T. James. Part 5. Chapter 20. Why do we react the way we react? We all know what controls the reactions of animals to different signals and stimuli appropriate to varying circumstances are the instincts. In the case of humans, because we're rational animals, one more variable enters into play with this: intuition or reason. How does reason manifest? What role does it play in our temperaments or responses? For the sake of this study at least, let us consider all our actions as just reactions to instincts or reactions to somebody else's actions, which then can go into a recursive loop of reactions to instincts and reactions to somebody else's actions. What controls our reactions? There are two important parameters associated with every entity, action or a reaction, that shape our response. One is whether the entity is harmful or not, and the other is cogency, whether the entity is rational or not. Taking these into consideration, there are four possible responses. 1. When the entity is harmful as well as rational. 2. When it is not harmful, but rational. 3. When it is harmful, but not rational. And 4. When the entity is neither harmful nor rational. Let us examine each case. In the first case, where falls almost all experiences and transactions of the material world, we critically examine each such entity. Using the best available resource, we take pains to formulate and deliver an appropriate response. In short, we always react to the harmful and the rational, most fittingly. Many examples can be cited. The way we confront our health issues, and the success we have achieved in commanding our planet and exploring the world beyond our skies could easily fit in, as a few appropriate ones. In all these, a rather structured, formal and pragmatic approach could be easily seen in effecting a solution to the problem at hand. A casual glance at the way we confront these issues is enough to make this clear. When we come to the next case, that is entities that are not harmful, but rational, unlike the previous case, our response does not follow a predictable path. The variation in our responses also does not show any pattern, or we do not react to these entities in a fitting manner. A couple of examples can make this clear. 1. Our self-destructive approach to the issue of child labor. By practically removing all possibilities of proper engagement with work or work-related tasks, we are effectively hindering the overall development of children. 2. A self-defeating style for helping the poor. In our desire to help those involved in traditional, outdated style of living, we end up forcibly making these people continue with the outdated lifestyle. Little do we realize that, as time passes by, it shall become more and more difficult for them to assimilate with the rest of the world. 3. Our misplaced priorities. By crying hoarse about the imagined destruction of our habitat, we, unknowingly, I think, prevent many futuristic developments from taking place, especially from the areas which need such improvements the most. This, in fact, will put the future generations at a severe handicap in coexisting with the rest of the world, at least as equals, especially when the borders between societies are getting shrunk on a global scale. This, I think, will pose insurmountable difficulties to our progeny. Tomorrow, when the ideas of basic science make a discernible shift from the past, nothing will be there to tie a natural link with those parts of the world which happen to become the contemporary centres of ideas or thoughts of latest knowledge. Now, let us see how we react to entities that are harmful but not rational. Here we can learn a shocking truth about ourselves. We are always more than eager to accept such entities into our society, that too with hardly any critical examination. In short, in this case also, we do not show a fitting reaction. For example, an idea that can take root may be about happiness. That human happiness can be achieved by inertia and inaction can be seen to be gaining huge popularity, instead of the idea that we tend to be happiest when we are vitally absorbed in creative pursuits, or when we are devoting ourselves to people or projects outside ourselves. Another one about human fallibility could find wide acceptability. The idea that we absolutely need something other or stronger or greater than oneself on which to rely, instead of the idea that it is better to take the associated risks of thinking and acting less dependently. When it comes to entities that are irrational as well as harmful, we do not show such determined opposition as in the case of entities that are harmful but rational. In no case is such entities summarily rejected. We always try to accommodate them in our society, according them with the greatest reverence such that these are accepted notwithstanding the harm caused. Can we call this a fitting reaction? For example, we are always seized on the idea that if something is or may be dangerous or fearsome, we should be terribly upset and endlessly obsess about it. This prevents us from both confronting it face to face to render it non-dangerous and, when that is not possible, accepting the inevitable. The last two cases, in fact, offer a good rationale for the prevalence of mythology and all related concepts, like religion, God or hell, in our day-to-day life. The whole purpose is to act as a repository of such entities, and these entities, as shown above, adds the necessary irrational content to our lives. Concede. We are approaching all issues in the material plane logically and with reason. We always compare the actual with the desired, compute corrections wherever necessary, and apply those to bring the actual to the desired. However, these account for only 1/4 of human transactions, the rest being of the forms rational and harmful, irrational and harmless as well as irrational and harmful. In all these transactions, as our behavior is guided more by certain irrational interests than by our natural leaning or orientation, a good part of human transactions lead to unintended consequences, which in many cases could be highly destructive. Therefore, a rather thorough study of human transactions, specifically of those lacking in reason, is necessary to evolve appropriate guidelines. Significantly, since the technique of evolving course corrections differs greatly between the material plane and the other ones, as evinced by the diagrams shown, such a study is essential to ensure continued welfare. We are happily living with the thought that humans are rational and are moving towards a great future. Is that so? Chapter 21 The Secret of Good Times, A Life of Achievement and Success. What is the secret of good times, a life of achievement and success? Walk into any library. The subject with the most number of titles can be seen to be hovering around success, management of progress, or how to become an achiever. Look closely to find that almost all of this deal with a few essential ingredients of good life and success, an imaginative selection from a rich collection of abstract entities that form part of human culture. Look more closely to find this is nothing but an intelligent combination of certain basic tenets, of course, dispersed meaningfully among different titles. If, say some time in the future, one is to go through the literary wealth of the 20th century and thereabouts to make an opinion of people and their lifestyle, the most significant finding shall be this: 20th century humans were always obsessed with the idea of success, as though it is not a natural element of life. Why is it so difficult for humans to achieve success and be happy in life? One of the earliest to pontificate on such matters, Greek philosopher Plato, has deliberated at length on such questions. If I risk giving a simplified version of his views, it goes like this. In each one of us, abstract ideas exist that accept, reject, celebrate or enjoy other abstract ideas. For example, while facing a question from a child, it is the abstract father who should, ordinarily, respond. If the question is from wife, the abstract husband. If it is about a certain facet of the republic, the abstract citizen. If it is about enjoyment, the abstract child in one, and so on appropriately take the position as the responding form. As long as the idea and the responding form in each of the cases are matched properly, communication and all the ensuing affairs also shall proceed in a smooth manner, ensuring that every transaction reaches its completion and every endeavour ends fruitfully. From the look of it itself, the above approach can be considered as a wise step towards achievement. All writings on success, all the books about happy life which were prevalent at various instances of time, more or less depend heavily on these findings of Plato. So also is the advance we made in many branches of science dealing with human transactions. But the matter didn't end there. Her quest for the secrets of success and good life continued regardless. Through many of the expositions of later years, like Epicurus and pragmatic thought, St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas and the theologians, Machiavelli and the thought that end justifies the means. The relentless search progressed. John Calvin and predestination, Francis Bacon and the need to look beyond what we see, Thomas Hobbes and the need for an equitable society, Descartes and the primacy of free will, John Locke and the desirability of liberalist approach, Leibniz and the thought that man can't have all answers, Voltaire and the love of freedom, David Hume and the significance of rational approach, Rousseau and the importance of personal liberty, Adam Smith and free market, Immanuel Kant and the role of human mind in worldly affairs, Karl Marx and the suppression of classes by classes, Sartre, Camus and the existential existence, as well as Simone de Beauvoir and the feminist onslaught are some of the better known ones to mould our present. Such pontification on philosophical issues is continuing unabated, however, at a noticeably reduced scale, as we cross the period of industrial revolution. A couple of things stand out. In these writings, there is a well-discernible slant towards the obscure, as we move away from Plato and advance in time. Though the learned ones may view this as an indication to the fact that humans are thinking deeper, as time moves by, I take this as our desire to move more towards the irrational. But, as we saw above, after the Industrial Revolution, such an approach seems to have taken a hit. I think, as science moved more and more secrets of nature to our drawing rooms, the topics of discussions naturally took recourse towards the rational, in place of esoteric topics to hold our interest, as we had to resort to deeper and deeper insight into the newly learned secrets of the universe. Each and every part of our daily life became a perfect fit for concentration, devotion, and reflection. However, rational topics were found to be grossly unsuitable for these acts, since, sooner or later, an answer originates, effectively putting a stop to further transactions of the intellect. This necessitates either another topic to ponder or, resorting to deeper consideration, and other intellectual commerce, of the one already in use. Concede, deeper insight into anything can result in welcome changes in our life and living. However, certain unwelcome intrusions are also our share. A visible effect of such bombardment is the constant attempt of our society to grapple with these changes. This, many a time, result in an unforeseen and destructive ambience and sends out a rather incorrect message of a race constantly at war with itself. One of the few abstract topics left is the one dealing with achievement, success or the good life. Naturally, repeated use of this topic will have to be necessarily proposing different approaches to these issues, each having the potential to result in many books. Some parts of those books may contain findings and recommendations that are appropriate to certain instances of time, place, or the type of people involved. However, the secret of success, as explained by Plato, still remains the only analysis, valid in all circumstances and at all times, while having applicability in real life. All that is unpleasant with our world can easily be traced to a longing for success in life or our objections to someone else's search for the same. Is it that our idea of success is wrong? Chapter 22. A man can't find what is good for him, but as men, they however do. A man may not be intelligent, but men definitely are. I think we can safely say, the more intelligent one is, the lesser the quantum of errors committed. In that case, can't, how often we err, becomes a measure of IQ. It seems so, since the popular definition of intelligence takes into account both the ability to learn or understand things or to deal with new or difficult situations, Merriam-Webster, and the distinctions one is aware of about a given concept. Other definitions, like the ability to learn or understand or to deal with new or trying situations, and the ability to apply knowledge to manipulate one's environment or to think abstractly as measured by objective criteria, also support such a view. This is true even when we observe other areas or aspects of our lives that are distinctly human, such as leadership intelligence, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and positive intelligence, where, to be free of error can be thought to be as a sign of intelligence. Also, none of the commonly occurring subdomains of intelligence, namely, visual spatial intelligence, verbal linguistic intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, logical mathematical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, musical intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, as well as naturalistic intelligence can be seen as an exception to this. And we say, 2A is human. The best-selling writing implements at Amazon are those with an eraser attached. But not 2A is something associated with all other forms of life. Does this imply that those are more intelligent than humans? To answer this question, let us re-examine in earnest the whole gamut of life and living, both for humans and for all other forms of life. In fact, we can safely reduce this rather wide area of search to just two aspects of living. 1. How good or effective is their approach as far as comfort and longevity of life? And 2. What is going to be the load on the environment and how much of resources get depleted in each generation that can be a measure of the long-term survival of the species? Now when I look at our life and living, a good bunch of contradictions arises. Steven Pinker's bestseller, How the Mind Works, opens with an interesting observation. Animals do not ill-treat humans, even when humans are on the wrong side. On top of it, animals have to put up with unspeakable aggression from humans, even when they are not on the wrong side. Why don't we accept the possibility that it is so because animals are more civilized? Just like among us, the more civilized we are, the more accommodating our nature. We are ready to put up with more assault, or, take childbirth. More and more importance is being attributed to unassisted childbirth, both for the comfort of the mother and for containing the trauma. But all other forms of life are already following this latest finding. Humans do everything they can to save them from the damage done by natural calamities as well as forms of extreme violence, but follow everything in their lifestyle that can harm them. Whereas all other forms of life show a rather resigned approach when it comes to the inevitable but scrupulously avoid anything and everything except those well established as part of their diet and lifestyle. During my younger years, both as a student and while employed, I have always noticed a striking alacrity in each and every one of us towards solving others' problem. The capacity to solve such issues used to be taken as the desired talent, and the more incapable one was in doing own job, the keener the urge shown to correct others. This urge many a time brought the imaginative in us to the fore. Each of us used to be having quite a good amount of responsibilities on our head, at least some of those needing urgent attention. All but the essential ones we postpone, and the ones which happen to get served would be in receipt of our attention, till we find an excuse for not continuing with the attempt. In short, though no human can look after himself, all humans look after others and hence they survive well, as a species. This, in fact, is a good description of human nature. As individuals, we bother about other individuals more than ourselves, and, as a group, we are worried about other groups more than our own group, and as a country, we are always concerned about other countries more than our own country. All these either ends in close cooperation or result in a horrible fight, both of which we do remarkably well. But when it comes to anything in between, we always are found wanting, and we are severely error-prone whenever we are left to ourselves. Can we say, man is not intelligent, but men are? Chapter 23 is language, for communication. Among all contraptions man has made, language stands out as the one understood more easily, in clear ways, and in indisputable terms, by each one of us, and it is generally understood as a systematic means of communicating by the use of sounds or conventional symbols. We identify language as something that is closely linked with our life, its existence, our awareness of its presence and the ultimate delight or achievement. We invoke language in all our affairs, whether to please or to nag, to applaud or to boo or to scold or to acclaim. No other human contrivance is of greater avail than language. Also, the language itself acts as an authoritarian system, which formats our brain in a suppressive structuring way, and makes our thinking so different from the emotional imaging of other forms of life, which produce logic in a bit different way, and is well proven for error-free communication. However, this is also a fact. Much of the disturbances, hatred, and violence, or other unpleasant happenings in our midst wouldn't have been there, had our understanding of the language been different. Also, our history would have been free of many chapters recounting events of considerable hostility between societies, hatred, pain, and suffering, not to mention the good that would have resulted from aiming our effort towards something not so destructive. How else should we recognize the role of language? Or rather, What is language for, if not for communication? As a first step towards an answer, assume there is no language. By language, I mean a structured system of symbols, with associated rules, grammar, etc. What handicap do we face? What can't be attempted by us? It is not difficult to see that it is possible to continue with almost all the functions served by languages using some other human capability. Like for communicating ideas, signs and actions can be of great help. In fact, even when we use language for communicating with others, it is the concurrent use of signs, actions, or expressions that ultimately result in conveying the exact meaning. This is true when it comes to expressing, showing, or acknowledging emotions as well. Therefore, in the primary sphere of its use, the absence of language need not pose an insurmountable problem. But we are at a loss, when it comes to another sphere of its use, an important activity of humans, thinking. In the absence of a language, it becomes impossible to think, imagine, or form a mental picture. Language thus can be identified more appropriately as the medium in which we think. And it goes without saying, the greater the ability of this medium to enable sublime or worthy thoughts, the more exalted and noble our notions and beliefs. The above inference had also been reached earlier by many philosophers, a notable one being Dr. Susanne Langer, who in her books, An Introduction to Symbolic Logic and Philosophical Sketches, dwells deeply on the role of language as a collection and processing of logic through symbols. As elaborated in these books, the primary purpose of language is to think. In this book, the notable fact that in a sizable number of Nobel Prizes awarded so far, the research work leading to the invention or discovery was conducted using a particular language, German, has been specially mentioned. This is true even for Nobel awardees from countries other than Germany, like USA or UK, who conducted their research in attachment to the German chair of their respective institutions. The author attributes this to the capability of the language in forming new words, expressions, dependencies, and the interconnections with significances, thus bombarding one constantly with fresh thoughts and ideas, the staple diet of all creative thinkers. Another widely observed peculiarity in connection with language is in the quality and style of ancient writing. Without exception, all historical documents written in all languages and old books contain very difficult grammatical structures, most of them beyond the comprehension of common people, and many of the books hide very complex and obscure ideas within those contents. If those writings were meant to communicate or inform certain ideas to people, none of them would have been like that. Rather, the complex nature of use of language and presentation of ideas is a clear proof that these books would have been meant to keep the learned entertained, leaving them to their deep reverie. We are in fact belittling language by terming it merely as a means of communication. By not selecting a language based on its appropriateness as a vehicle of thought and by selecting one based solely on the ease of communication, we are making two serious mistakes. 1. We are losing whatever good that would have resulted from the involvement of a huge population in activities involving cognitive transactions. 2. We are ceding possibilities of collisions and skirmishes, as individual preferences for communication need not be the same for all, the results of which are already visible in our society. Shouldn't we be more rational in choosing a language, at least for teaching the next generation? Chapter 24: How to Stop Terrorism. I know, we, the humans, are a species with great potential. We can very well achieve success in the war against terror, provided we identify terror, our enemy, correctly. What is terror? Terror is nothing but a mix of violence and extremism. Violence is nothing but forms of physical entertainment that remains enjoyable when within limits, gone beyond control. This can happen due to many reasons, like ignorance, wickedness, or ulterior motives. Now, what is extremism? I agree, there is no easy answer, and I think the world is in a constant grapple with this, as all governments think that they know the answer and take appropriate action, compounding an already complex position. Let us begin with a definition, since the first step in solving any problem is to define the problem. Extremism is nothing but taking a good or worthy idea, or an amusement, to its limits, regardless of unfortunate repercussions, impracticalities, arguments, and feelings to the contrary, and with the intention, not only to confront, but also to eliminate all kinds of opposition to whatever one may choose to identify with. Also, it displays severe intolerance toward all views other than one's own. In fact, the rather stupendous level of its effects is so arresting, we are always letting ourselves forget its humble, friendly and pleasant beginnings. Except where it involves the adoption of means to political ends with total disregard for the life, liberty, and human rights of others, we are generally happy with extremism. It can, in fact, be said that, as someone of consequence put it, extremism, in the defense of liberty, is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation, in the pursuit of justice, is no virtue. This, I think, is what makes extremism part of our society, notwithstanding its peril, and sidelines the virtue of temperance, notwithstanding its appeal. Well, let us see some of the ways people have chosen to hug extremism. Ethno-national extremism. It is important to point out that nationalism in itself need not become extreme. It's just a focus on the nation or national identity, ethnic spirit or some other desirable symbol. Think flags, anthems, the World Cup. Ethno-national extremists, however, have a particular idea of what they want in their nations, or how other nations deserve to be treated. Their vision for the nation often means just one identity, which normally excludes other cultures, colours, religions, or ideas to them. Other such movements may be adept at appropriating a mix of colour, religion, ethnicity or locale to suit the moment, to remain relevant in a changing world. In the final analysis, any idea or belief can become extreme. Thus, scope exists for political extremism, environmental extremism, animal rights extremism and many others, limited only by one's imagination. These views may pose a threat to certain groups in society, even one not of a violent form. In short, we should consider extremism as a part of our life, a part which has become uncontrollable due to certain reasons. Is this right? If it is a part of our life, how did it attain that position? What metabolic need is met by extremism? Let us go further and look at the different shades and styles of its appearance as well as the reasons for its proliferation. What role, if any, do we play in this? We are not able to find the exact nature and causes of extremism because we are yet to make a proper, unequivocal definition itself. To find out when and under what conditions does an abnormal act becomes fit to be termed as extreme, let us study how we respond to abnormal acts and what reactions we show. For this, let us classify all such acts into 4 groups based on 2 significant questions. 1. Whether the act is harmful, and 2. Whether the act is rational. Thus, an act can be rational and harmful, or rational but not harmful, or not rational but harmful, or both. Not rational and not harmful. Remember, an abnormal act can be from any of the 4 groups, but a response to that act depends on which group the act belongs to. This is a simplified diagram showing the variations in a response to acts. Abnormal acts that cause the desire to conquer are the ones leading to extremism. Take abnormal acts that are rational as well as harmful. All the progress we made in human history is our efforts in handling such instances appropriately. Examples can be found in the way we conquered health problems, our planet, and space or other challenges of science and technology. We are quick to identify abnormal behavior and take suitable action. Every act will be treated in a fitting manner, as long as it belongs to this group. We are quick to confront the issue, condemn it as appropriate and use all our resources to form a suitable reaction, like a new invention. Take abnormal acts that are rational but not harmful. Many of our entertainment, social enjoyments, celebrations fall into this group. There are cases where people have attempted such acts beyond reasonable limits. However, no act will get termed as extremism if it belongs to this group. As long as the abnormal act is not harmful, we are beyond ourselves with accolades, in the form of great prizes, awards or other endowments, instead of identifying those also as another form of excess, say benevolent extremism. Hence, acts will never be treated as abnormal, as long as it belongs to this group. We are quick to detect the act and its harmless nature, and perhaps raise a global, endless, debate on its future to ensure that it is dealt appropriately. Take abnormal acts that are not rational, and not harmful. In this case also, as long as it is not harmful. We do not show any opposition. And if such acts happen to be beneficial to society, we are again beyond ourselves with accolades, in the form of great prizes, awards or other endowments, instead of identifying those also as another form of excess, benevolent extremism, as we saw above. All acts are celebrated, as long as it belongs to this group, as the N.D. Russell ought. Not only that we enjoy such kind of issues, but also have been according the special status of reverence. Take abnormal acts that are not rational, but harmful. Especially, in this case, we are always eager to find a cause for such acts. If that happens to have a link with religion, we will be competing with each other in rationalizing the act, mostly as a providential sign. Even when there is no attempt to support, we shall not be opposing this, as long as it remains irrational. At most, we may take some steps to avoid harm, if there is any. Here too, all acts are left untouched, as long as it belongs to this group. We are never disturbed by rational thoughts when we follow such issues in earnest. We are ready to overlook inconsistencies and are always in awe of the resulting flutter. Thus we can easily note that we identify an abnormal act as extremist, only when it results in great and visible harm. If such acts happen to be of actual or potential benefit to society, we are beyond ourselves with accolades. In fact, many of the great prizes, awards or other endowments of the world are actually for celebrating such deeds. The right approach would have been to identify these acts also as another form of excess, say benevolent extremism. Instead, we find reasons for celebrating such acts even when those are harmful, as long as the harm is directed to somewhere else but our own backyards. Thus extremism originates in our love for the irrational, and as one can easily see, anything and everything can become irrational when at either of its extremes, i.e., too much or too less. To sum up, whenever we are confronted with extreme acts that are also undoubtedly harmful, our reaction depends on whether the acts can be termed as rational or not. If rational, we use all available efforts in dealing with the issue to its conclusion, mostly with the death of its perpetrators. For example, an armed gang, if caught indulging in material pursuit, is swiftly brought to justice. If irrational, again we are beyond ourselves in searching for a cause, and, if the cause can be linked with religion, we will be competing with each other in finding a justification for the acts. For example, the armed gang, if caught indulging in the same pursuit, but with certain abstract reasons, symbols or signs that can justify the need for material gain, like a command received as a dream, is generally held to great veneration and awe, rather than bringing to justice. Our desire shall be to find a place to accommodate them in our society. You see, as shown in the diagram, we deal with an abnormal or violent act appropriately, only when it is harmful as well as rational. On all the remaining occasions, we rather encourage such acts leading to greater consequences that beget more such acts. This should explain the ease with which extremism spreads. Now we can formulate a defense, and to begin with, let us define extremism as any act that is way beyond its rational limit. To continue, let us discourage all forms of extremism simultaneously, each one of those involving violence, as well as of other benign forms, dealt appropriately. I find no reason to believe that substantial changes shall not follow. In short, terrorism, though is rightly identified as the most serious problem affecting the mankind today, is the least understood of all our problems. Once we learn what is behind extremism, making our society safer is child's play. Chapter 25: How to be free of intolerance. What is intolerance? Intolerance is nothing but someone assuming an extreme position on one's propensity to choose a particular alternative. In fact, the preference to finding or choosing from a treasure of alternatives is one of the basic elements that separate humans from other forms of life. We, humans, show this every day in whatever we do, and those who are able to choose from a greater amount of alternatives are considered to be leading a richer life. There is nothing in this world that can't be brought under the purview of subjectivity. Variations in taste, colour, smell, as well as physical, chemical or other properties are there in abundance to let man exercise his selection genes. In normal circumstances, This propensity to choose may amount to liking towards the chosen one and an absence of it towards all the other ones. Whenever the liking or the absence of liking crosses the rational limit, these metamorphose into intolerance, a violent and dangerous form of one's harmless tastes. On other occasions, we celebrate such differences as enriching our cultural diversity, as guardians of values, as harbingers of progress, and in the end, elevating the position of our race on the tree of life. This being a part and parcel of our life, it is no wonder that intolerance does find its way into human transactions whenever the need to go irrational arise. What does it do? In fact, intolerance had a part to play in all that took place in human society since its inception. All the inventions and discoveries, all voyages or explorations, as well as acts of love or scourge of war, owe its existence to someone's intolerance in its mild form, disagreement or dissatisfaction with the existing. In other words, these can be easily attributed to a great extent to discontentment of some, few or all the people, of things, beings, or their doings. Quite a few times it did lead to something good. Many a time, we can say, whenever it took to its extreme form, intolerance, to things equally bad. Thus one may say, Renaissance is but intolerance to barbarism, or the Industrial Revolution is but intolerance to menial life. Like that, intolerance to disease, death, or destruction kept on adding all these years to the joy of living. And wherever it did lead to something better, as in the case of inventions and discoveries since time immemorial, we are beyond ourselves in showering adulation, even when the result involved large-scale destruction and death. As long as we are not the sufferers, we are in awe of such instances. The only time we recognize intolerance as unwelcome is when it is directly causing great harm, specifically to our society. That too, of a huge value, compared to whatever danger it is causing to the rest of the mankind. In all other cases, we consider this abnormal behavior as devotion, dedication, or hard work. It then is no real wonder that intolerance has become a part of our life. What nourishes intolerance? Let us examine afresh our attitude towards life. Let us analyze what exactly we do while encouraging or discouraging any of the aspects of our social life, the transactions we constantly engage in, and other facets of human nature. All those who make any form of worthwhile contributions to our society are honoured with valuables, many a time accompanied by great pomp and show. Even those who exhibit irrational behaviour are honoured, as long as it is not about something that is of great harm to us. In a few cases, we go much beyond that by showering such efforts with awards and other forms of recognition. These honours continuously force us to concentrate more and more on one single aim, overthrowing the natural human tendency of finding amusement anywhere. Another facet of the human nature that can give rise to intolerance is the way we are disposed to differentiate between entities even in the absence of such contributions. It should not be difficult to see that between the many honours and forms of discrimination there is only a thin line. Both nurtures intolerance, though called by different names. It, then, is no wonder that intolerance continues to remain a part of our life. Presently, what are we doing? We are trying to fight intolerance by intolerance. This is not an effective response, since the success of this approach is dependent only on brute force. Whose intolerance is strongest is the one who will eventually win. In all likelihood, the struggle between the two will not reach an unmistakable end, making intolerance continue as a part of human life. And history will continue repeating. Where are we now? In fact, we have reached a situation where anything can become invaluable or worthy of adulation, as long as it is in the extreme. In fact, no ability, or lack of it, or talent is without its use. One can always try for a world record in that. And as a result of the phenomenal value we have been giving all these years to any trait that is of high intensity, the populace is being encouraged to somehow achieve the extremes, read intolerance of the mediocre, both in the form of material benefits and as great name and fame. The good that happened with the great men of the past turned all subsequent generations into seekers of the unattainable. Those gifted among us who are adept at intellectual pursuit cultivated their intolerance in such paths suitable for scaling great heights of name and fame. Out came Nobel laureates, academicians or scientists, who sowed the seeds of happy living. Some of us took to arts and crafts, and a few others happened to have their taste in physical entertainments, all for leading a comfortable life. And out came more people of greatness, like authors, poets, historians, or sportsmen, who are but the pillars of happy living. But finally, when from the remaining ones, the ones fastidious and weird tasteful of physical entertainments or jobs, went to the extremes of their talents, out came another mighty breed, the practitioners of violence. But in this case, unlike other forms of arts or science, they posed a threat to happy living. Hence, instead of giving recognition, our society marks them out with a meaningful name, the intolerant. In short, the spread of intolerance is not by design. Some of us happen to foster that, by accident. Where do we go from here? We are already seized of the dangers posed by intolerance, as could be gathered from our all-out war against this. Sample poster shown here testifies to this, quite eloquently. As we saw earlier, the origin of intolerance being closely linked to our nature of extolling the extremes, a natural cure for this could be found in a fresh impetus to moderation. Intolerance is nothing but the extremes of quite worthy and desirable qualities like fastidiousness, exactness, or stringency, coupled with an ardent desire to tie ourselves down to some dogma or the other. The qualities of a meticulous lifestyle, as well as single-minded dedication, are a great boon in the material world, for example in scientific studies, research, or medicine. But, not only that these are of no value in spiritual matters, but also there is the danger of its leading to, causing or inciting intolerance. We can try to eliminate intolerance at the very source. Let us now show Nelson's eye to the superlative, especially if it happens to be at the cost of neglecting any other faculty. I concede, such a move involves a revolutionary change in our outlook and may entail few unthinkable propositions, like abolition of great honours and medals, or restructuring them in such a way that only those who excel in moderation stands to be awarded. But I think it is worth the effort. There are no predictable losses, and the benefits are uncountable.